Okay, so the next thing to do now, as we did the foot collision, so let's do the body collision. So that means if the head hits any parts of the body of the snake, then we just game over, we just finish the game, right? So let's go into our sprites document. We have this body collision function here, and the way we're gonna check that is, let's do this part first here. So we're gonna check for body collision, and the way that this is gonna work, as the head is separated from all the body parts, we just need to check, we need to loop through this list of the body parts, and we need to check if any of these coordinates is equals to the head of the snake. So if that's true, then that means we have a body collision. So before we do the body collision function, in here we have to check for body in self dot snake parts, and then we're gonna have to check for if body dot body collision, then that means we have to stop playing. So we do stop playing self dot playing false. That means we'll just stop the loop, and in this case it will just start a new game basically. And the body collision here, we have to check for the self x, so for every body position x against the game heads.x and self.y against the game heads.y. If that's true, we return true. If not, we just return false. Okay, so we have this, and let's see if this is working. So let me just eat pieces of food in here. So just make the snake a bit bigger. So if I hit myself, then we just start over. And yeah, so this is working. There we go, and it just starts over every time if I hit myself. So the next thing to do is, when we eat the food, we need to change the location of this food. So as I said before, instead of deleting the food and then creating again, we'll just keep this variable food in here with the object, and we're just gonna change this position for a random value. So for that, I'm going to create a function. Let's just create a function here, because we need to check is body part. That's the name of the function. So we're going to loop. So every time we eat a food, we need to delete that food. So we're not going to delete it, we're just going to change position. But then we're going to take the new position and we're going to check against the body parts of the snake. If it's exactly the same as the body part of the snake, then we're not going to spawn that food in there. We're going to look for another position. And if that's not position, if that new position is not in the body snake, then we just spawn the food in there. We just move the foods to that position. So this function is gonna work. So we're gonna check the coordinates against the body of the snake. And this function, we have to take a x and a y value, which are gonna be random, right? So let's just import random in here. The x and y, they're gonna be a random integer between 0 and in this case this is the x, and it's be between 0 and the end of the screen on the right side. So that is the width, right? So that's why I put the grid width here, so we can check the position exactly. So we're gonna do grid width but then we're gonna do -1 because, let me bring this up. So we have our window here, right? And we have all the grids. That's the grid. And then on the X value, we need to check from 0, which is this wall, up to this wall here. But if we check this wall here, it's gonna spawn the food outside. That's why we do a -1, because then it only checks for the grid width -1. So we will spawn in here, not outside of the grid. Hope that makes sense. So we do this, and then for the Y, we do the same thing, but with a grid height. So it's exactly the same thing. So instead of checking the actual grid width, I'm going to check grid width -1, because otherwise we're going to spawn the food outside of the window, and then we're not going to be able to see it. Okay, so we get two random coordinates, x and y, and now we need to check the x and y against the body parts. So we're going to loop through the body and self snake parts, and then we're going to see if the body x and if x is equals to body x and y equals to body y, that means we're getting the x and y exactly the same as one of the body parts. So then we need to call this function again. So we're going to do a recursive call in here. So then we call this function again. We generate another x and y random values, and then we do the checks again. X, so we're going to call this function again, self.is body part. But then if the x and y is not in the body x and y, we can just return x and y, because we're going to be calling this function down here. So in here, if the x is equal, so if it's in the body, then we just call x and y equals the part itself. So let's say it goes once, and then the x and y is exactly the same as one of the body, then we call again. Then it goes like that, x and y now is different. Then we return this x and y, we store into this value, and then we will just skip it, and then we just return the x and y. This x and y is going to be called down here on the food collision actually. So when we do a food collision, we have to append a new snake, a new body parts, but also we need to give an x and y equals to self.is body parts. Okay, so if we do this function and then the x and y is not in the body, then that's all good. Then we do self.foods x equals x, self.foods y equals y, and then we append the snake. Okay, let's try this. So now if I take the foods, you see it spawns somewhere else, and this spawning is totally random within the grid. So you see it spawns on the end of the grid or on the beginning, but will never spawn outside. So I can keep going. Now let's hit myself, then it stops, and the game starts over. Okay, we're almost done with the... Actually, this you could call it as a finished game, in a way, because you can play, you can eat the foods, increases, all of that. We're not keeping score yet. One thing that I like doing it is if the snake goes outside of the wall, it should come back on the left side. Some games you can see that if the snake hits the wall, then it ends. You can do it like that as well, but I like to do it as if the snake goes up, it would appear on the bottom. So to do that, we're gonna go into the updates just after the body collision. We can do some checks in here. So we're gonna send the snake to the other side of the screen. Okay, to do that, we need to check the coordinates of the snake. So there's the head of the snake. So we need to check if the head of the snake x is more than the grid width minus 1, then we send the head x to 0. And the same here. So if the head of the snake y is more than the grid height minus 1, because otherwise we're going to go down and then it's going to take one more step to go back. Then if that's true, then we send the head of the snake y to 0. Okay, let's do that. First we check self.head.x is more than the grid width minus 1. And if that's true, then we do self.head x equals 0. So we send that to the left side. Now this should be working already. So if I go to the right side, I come back on the left side here. See? Now we need to do that for all directions. So elif self.head x minus 0. Oops, this is a dot in here. Then we send the head.x equals to the grid width. So we send it to the right side. Okay, so now if I go this way, I appear on that way. And that's it. Now let's do up and down. Elif self.heads.y more than grid height minus 1, self.heads.y equals 0. Elif self.heads.y less than 0, self.heads.y equals to grid height. So now we should have all the directions working. So if we go to the right, if we go to the left, go up, and if we go down. Okay, so now we just have to do the UI now. So the start screen, the game over screen, and also I didn't show you, but in the game, if we go around and we press spacebar, we can pause the game. So every time, and it shows this paused. It's written in the screen, so we can pause it anytime basically. So let's do the pause thing first. I'm gonna go to our sprite class and we're gonna create a new class called UI elements. UI elements. Element, yes. And we're not gonna use the sprites class for this. So we're just going to create our own class in here. So we're going to define the init, which is going to always take self, and then we're going to take a y coordinate, x and a y coordinates, and also we need a text for it. We're going to be using that for the game over text as well, and all the other text that we have on the screen. So in here we do self.x and self.y equals x and y, and we're gonna also do x times tile size, so we can keep on that moving by tile size. And we also need self.text equals text. Okay, we're only gonna have one function here that's gonna be draw. It's gonna draw the text on the screen, and we're gonna take self, and also we're gonna take this screen, and I think I'm gonna also put a font size in here so we can change the font size easily. To be able to write things, then we need to, I'm gonna create a font which is gonna be the surface, or the pygame.fonts.sys font, which takes a name which is the font family. So I'm gonna be using, let's use Arial, and then it takes the font size. And then the text, we need to render it, so it's fonts. So we're gonna take the font.render, and we need to pass the self.text, Then there's a variable here, there's a Boolean variable which is true or false, that is anti-alias, is just to make the corners a bit better, a bit smoother basically. So I always set that to true, and the color, which I'm gonna set it to white. We don't need a background color in here, as we're gonna be using it's gonna be transparent basically. And now we need to do screen.blit, so we need to blit that into the screen. We pass the text, and we pass a tuple which is self.x and self.y, so where we want to blit it. Okay, this should be all for this class. Let's go back to our main class, our main file, sorry. Let's just test this out. So let's go to new. I'm just going to create a new UI element. I'm going to pass an X and Y. Let's do 10, 10 and a text test. Actually, we need to do that in the draw function, not in the new. Where's my draw function? Let's do it in here to test. Okay, let's put a name for this. Test equals that, and then whoops, test dot draw, and we pass self dot screen and a font size of 10. So now, well, let's make this a little bit bigger, 100. Okay, now we have the test in there. So that's what we're gonna do for the paused. For the pause, when we press spacebar, we're gonna pause the game, right? We're gonna create a variable. So let's delete this. This is just for test. Let's create a variable right here on top after the orientation. It's gonna be self.paused. It's gonna be false. We're gonna initialize as false because the game is not gonna be paused. And then in the draw function, we do if self.paused. Then we create this element which takes an X and Y. I'm gonna put 10, 10 for now, and it's gonna be paused. And then we're gonna draw that into the screen with a font size of, let's say, 100. Okay, so now it's not showing there. We need a way to activate this self.pause. For that, we're gonna use the spacebar. So we're gonna come in here into the key down, so all these keys, and then we're gonna check if events.key is equals to pygame dot case underscore space. So if that's true, we do self dot pause equals not self dot pause. So we're gonna invert every time. So if the game is paused and we press spacebar, then it becomes unpaused. And if it's unpaused, then it becomes paused. Hope that makes sense. And here, if I press spacebar, you see the screen. The game is not pausing yet, but you see the screen. It's not exactly on the middle, but that's okay. Okay, so every time I press spacebar, I have that. So now let's pause the game. To do that, we're gonna go to our update, and everything that is in the update section, we have to check if the game is not paused. So if not self.paused, that means the game is running. Then we do all of this. So if you select everything that you want to indent and you press tab, it indents everything. So now if I run it and if I press spacebar, it pauses. Okay, and you can't do anything. So I can press all the keys, nothing's gonna happen unless I unpause it. And also all of this needs to be inside as well, because right now if I pause the game and I press the key down and I unpause it, then the snake goes down. So we don't want that. So all of this is gonna indent, and we're gonna check if self, if not self.post. We do that, all of this. So now if I pause and I press the down key and I unpause it, the snake keeps going forward. Okay, so now let's do the main screen and then the game over screen as well. And then we just need to do the high score saving. So okay, let's go down here after the events and let's create a new function in here actually. So let's go, it's one more. So we're gonna define a function called main screen. And inside of this, we're gonna paint the screen black. You can do black or you can do even the background color. If it's better, do the background color. Let's create an element called, it's gonna be the title. So let's put, I think I have on 8 and 7. And then for the text, it's gonna be just snake game. And we also need to call this function here before we start this loop. Could even, let's put this function in here because we're gonna use the same screen for the game over. So once it's game over, then we'll come back to this screen. I do need to draw this into the screen and a font size. Let's use 100. Actually, no, I think this main screen needs to be before the while loop. Let me see. Yeah, it's just going very fast in there. You see the screen. I know why. It's because we need to do pygame.display. We need to flip the display. See, so you see very fast in there. I think now we can put this back in here. Is this gonna work? Yeah. So you see very fast. It's because we're not stopping. So we start the loop, we go through this, we fill, we write, we flip, and then we start the new game straight away. So for that, we need to call a function. We're gonna create a new function called wait, just to wait in this screen until we do some action. So define wait, and in here we're gonna do another loop in here. So waiting equals true, and while waiting, we're gonna do some events in here because we're gonna have some buttons as well. So we need to keep listening for those button press. So now if I run this, I should have the screen snake game, and now we're gonna put the buttons in here. So right now we can't access the game, we can't do anything, and it's glitching as well because we need to have this in there. So for event, we need to check for the pygame.quit. Oops, I'm just gonna copy down here. Now we can do this, so we can move the screen, we can quit, but we can't access the game.